only the future president would survive. He came home to marry his sweetheart, Barbara Pierce. He kept a Yale family tradition alive, captained the baseball team, graduated Phi Beta Kappa, and set out to find his own fortune in the oil fields of West Texas. The fortunes would come in a then revolutionary business of drilling for oil offshore in the Gulf of Mexico. But family tragedy would find him too. After their first son, George W. Bush, Robin Bush was born, but the little girl fell ill near her 3rd birthday. It was leukemia. The Bushes rushed her to the best medical experts they could find on the East Coast, but she died in October of 1953. She's buried at the Presidential Library in College Station. Her famous father will be laid to rest by her side.
The story of George Bush is a success story.
But the former naval aviator soldiered on. He would be chairman of the Harris County Republican Party.
George Bush, the happy family man, is now George Bush, Republican candidate for the United States Senate.
He never reached the Senate, but served 2 terms in the U.S. House of Representatives.
I certainly hope, and I'll bet you do too, that our children can grow up knowing what freedom really is.
Ambassador to the United Nations, director of the CIA, and vice president in a storied political career before his family journey brought him to the Oval Office.
We are Americans, part of something larger than ourselves.
But for all his success, he often credited his mom, Dorothy Walker Bush, with having the biggest impact on his life. The devoutly religious matriarch who drilled humility and modesty into her sons. His life was not defined by the political system he navigated. The president's daughter, Dora Bush, wrote, "He was defined by the set of beliefs his mother taught him. By his remarkable life, it's clear Mom taught him well."
Get me on camera.
Right now where the motorcade is right at this moment.
Yeah, we're taking a live look from Air 11, and you can see on the right-hand side is traffic stops on one side of the freeway just to pay their respects, obviously. And they just come off of the West Loop, it looks like, to the Southwest Freeway, just over the I-69 610 interchange. I'm going to zoom in on the left side of the map and just give you a wider view. Obviously, the funeral home on the left side, they've got to get down to Ellington Airport. Expected to be a 30 to 40-minute drive time for them. Probably closer to half an hour at this point, and certainly this route was not publicized in advance, so a lot of people not gathering on the streets right now. We did see a lot more in the neighborhoods there, but obviously with this drive, they're going to be on a lot of freeways. So if you are traveling in this area right now, you can expect further delays. They're now on the West Loop traveling through the city of Bel Air. They just passed over Forness. And you can see one side of the freeway, the southbound side of the West Loop, entirely shut down. People there waiting on the on-ramp. Certainly a treat for them because they did not plan on probably seeing. The timing would have been impossible to predict, but now certainly they're getting the view of a lifetime, paying their respects as former President Bush's body is taken from that funeral home in the Tanglewood subdivision on into southeast Houston to Ellington Field and Ellington Air Force Base, where the plane that's typically used as Air Force One will be transporting his body to Washington, D.C. So obviously there's actually, and if you look on the right-hand side, there's some people pulling over. They knew what was coming their way, and some people actually getting out of their vehicles there on the shoulder of the freeway because they're being stopped anyway, getting out to take photos as the hearse passes by. And earlier on, outside the funeral home, we saw in that larger bus that's at the back of the line there, that motorcade, we saw several of the Bush family members, including one of his sons, Neil, one of his grandsons also, Pierce, getting into that bus as well. And so some of the family members are part of this motorcade, so we can assume that they also will be getting onto that plane, the 747, usually used as Air Force One. They'll be getting on board as well to fly with the president's body to Washington, D.C., so he can lie in state. And you can see now as they're passing over Bel Air and entering the Meyerland area now on the West Loop, again heading southbound on Houston's west side. So it looks like they're going to take a route. They did not initially publicize this. You know, had we seen it publicized possibly for security reasons, but we also know there will be a welcoming back home for him Wednesday and Thursday as the funeral takes place, and then they transport his body again to College Station. There will be a part of our wider spread celebrations where people can line up along the train tracks and see the president one last time as he's taken for his burial. So here we're seeing a lot of people probably taken off guard, caught by surprise. They can't believe what they're seeing, and you wouldn't know it otherwise until you take a closer look at that hearse and realize this is not just another funeral. This is a former president of the United States being taken through the streets of Houston. And if you take a closer look at that funeral, if we get a closer look later on at that hearse, there's actually the presidential seal on the side. It's got 2 American flags. And of course, it's got an extra special police escort. We know some of President Bush's Secret Service detail actually served as the pallbearers, loading his casket into that hearse earlier on, just several minutes ago. So that was, they looked very somber. It's not a view that you're used to seeing with some of those Secret Service agents as well, having to load the body of the person who they served for several years here in the Houston area. Some of them, I'm sure, recent details, some of them having served the family for longer than that. And now they're traveling with him perhaps one last time. And I know Ron Trevino's now in the studio with us, along with Lisa Hernandez. Ron, we're so used to seeing the president in Houston.
I know you have
baseball games. It's such an experience for any Houstonian who sees the president now.
Well, what you're seeing here, Doug, is truly historic. We've never had anything like this in Houston before, and so no doubt a lot of these motorists don't know what's going on, but many of them do.
There's some more right there taking photos. So some of them have gotten a heads up now, because now at this point, I think they've been on the road for closer to 10 or 15 minutes. And again, this is the West Loop. There's Meyerland Shopping Center right there in the background at the top of the screen. So some people now are getting a heads up of what is happening, and they're pulling over to pay their respects, which usually when you see a funeral motorcade on the freeway, the other side of the freeway does not stop.
Right, right. And for many Houstonians, this might be their only chance. They may not get to go to the funeral, obviously, and some may not get to go to the memorial service and the big celebration that we're going to have in Houston tonight. But this is a truly historic time for us here in Houston. He's a man who's meant so much for so many of us here in Houston, who typifies what it is to be a Houstonian, who exemplifies all the great qualities of what it is to be a person from Houston, a person of high stature, but who always tried to be humble and who was always down to earth, and now making his way out of town.
Yep, they're curving now from the West Loop. They're taking that curve that takes you to the South Loop, so they will be passing by, it looks like they'll be passing by NRG, the Houston Astrodome, where he and Barbara went to so many Astros games through the years, and then Texans games, and of course later on they would go to Minute Maid Park to watch the Astros. I know growing up in Houston,
solace in believing
that happened to
they've
them
been reunited.
a couple times.
Yes.
Yeah, that happened to them a couple times, and it was always fun to see their reaction. So again, you can see the frontage road of the 610 loop there on the upper side. This is of your screen heading eastbound. The 610 loop is closed right now on the south side, so they're just about to pass by the Astrodome in NRG Park.